Hello and welcome to Westeros.org's bonus materials for our recap and review of this week's episode, Walk Punishment. This week I'll be handling the highs and the lows, and Ellie will start off and provide a bit of history background for this episode.
So, for this week's history, finally we have gotten to Riverrun, and we have met Catelyn's family. It's taken a long time. Those who have read the novels know that it's at the end of the first novel that we're introduced to Edmure, and the Blackfish is introduced even earlier than that, about midway through the novel. Let's first situate the Tullys a bit. The Tullys rule, they are the lords paramount of the Riverlands. Many of the high houses, the great houses of the Seven Kingdoms, started out as kings. The Starks were the kings in the north, the Orans were the kings of the Vale, the Baratheons, well, they ended up picking up from the ruling line that were kings of the Stormlands, and so on and so forth. The Tullys were not. The Tullys were, they were just kind of significant lords of the area, but they weren't like the greatest or most powerful lords. They were respected, and I guess the idea may be that they didn't make many enemies, so a lot of people could trust them. So when Aegon the Conqueror comes to conquer the Seven Kingdoms, at the time the Riverlands is controlled from the Iron Islands. King Harren the Black, who's spent 40 years building Harrenhal, this great folly of his, this great dream of his, and breaking the backs of the Riverlanders who were building it, and so on. And so they rebelled. They happily rebelled against him and joined Aegon. And Lord Tully at the time was kind of a ringleader of this rebellion, for whatever reason. And because of this, Aegon then made him Lord Paramount. It's interesting, but we haven't really heard that the Tullys have had much problem with this position. You would have hints that other houses, for example in the Reach, the Tyrells were in a similar position. They were the stewards, and they were given the rule of the Reach just because this high steward to the dead king, the dead royal family, opened the gates of Highgarden and handed over the keys of the realm. And so Aegon said, well, you're useful, you'll rule the whole thing. There are other houses in the Reach who complain bitterly about this, who say, we had more of a claim to Highgarden, and we should have been the ones who got that position. The Tullys don't have that problem. So bringing it to the present, as we know, Lord Hoster, Catelyn's father, has just died, and now her brother Edmure, he is the baby of the family, he's the youngest son. Or the only son, but he was the last born of the three of Hoster's children, is now Lord. But probably a lot of people are going to be much more interested in the enigma, the very tall, gruff figure next to him, and that is the Blackfish. Now, he is a popular character. He's kind of well liked. He's a pretty cool fellow. A veteran of 100 battles, and very well respected as a warrior and a soldier. Very much loved by Catelyn, as someone she could always turn to for advice and support. One thing they make the joke of is, and I hope they, obviously he jokes that no one remembers his actual name now. That's not true. He's Brendan Tully, Sir Brendan Tully, who made his name as quite a young man, during the War of the Ninepenny Kings, a war that's quite a long ways back at this stage. He was probably a squire, or perhaps maybe won his knighthood quite young at this war. Now, why is he called Blackfish? I mean, as you get from the material, Hoster and he argued a lot. They were constantly at loggerheads, and it's interesting as to. I'll get to that, but at one point in the argument, when they were arguing, his brother basically called him the black goat of the family, and Brendan, riffing off the fact that the Tully arms include a salmon or a trout, decided to say, better call me a Blackfish, and it kind of stuck. So he became known as the Blackfish, and he always wears a sort of black fish trout, to pin his cloak and so on. Now, why did they argue so much? Well, I mean, they did just that sort of brotherly thing. But one particular issue in the novels, and I don't know if they're ever going to bring it up, is Brendan refused to marry and he refused to marry. His brother found all these very suitable maidens for him, and Brendan steadfastly refused. And there was a sore point between them. It is never explicitly said why he refuses. Some may say, some like to believe it's just because he was so independent that he refused to allow anyone to decide. Others, maybe he's asexual, he's not interested. Maybe he was in love with someone and he couldn't have her, and so he'll choose to have no one. That's an interesting theory. I think there might be something to that. But a quite common one is, in fact, that he might be homosexual. He's not interested in marrying women, and he doesn't see many nobles, as we see with Renly. They see that they have to marry for political gain and so on. The Blackfish doesn't care. He'll marry because he wants to, and it seems he doesn't. Whether he's homosexual or not, I don't know. He's a cool character. The show has really not been very good at really giving a sense of the strategic movements and the role of the Tullys in all this conflict. And this is the last thing I want to talk about, because they have borrowed from A Clash of Kings, the end of Clash of Kings, where Edmure acts to do something which looks like a good idea at the time, but then turns out it completely messes up Robb's plans. And just like in the books, Brendan and Robb were being very unfair to poor Edmure. This idea that, they left in the books very ambiguous orders. And on the show, they've made them a little less ambiguous, but the fact that they literally tell him, well, Edmure said, well, I didn't know what you guys intended. He said, well, you would have known right here today if you had waited, is sort of, you usually should tell people your plan before a fact, not after a fact. And it's something you can't really stare at too closely. It's part of the problem is they don't really get a great sense of the movement, where Robb has been fighting, because in the book he went all the way off to the Western Lands and he was out of communication for a long stretch of time, so obviously he can't entrust his plans if they formed, to messengers or ravens even. He just kind of has to hope that... But I don't know. Edmure always gets a short end of a stick here. It's a bit of a curiosity. In the end, the important thing, I guess, is that there has been a mistake made. Edmure has been chastised, and this is going to have an impact on the further course of the story.
For the highs and lows this week, let's start with the low. It's it's a bit of an awkward thing, because you complain about something like this and then people are going to go, oh, you just don't like nudity and you're prudish, and well, no, we're not. But having this scene with Hodrick in the brothel and him getting these lessons from 3 selected prostitutes, including the one of only 4 women in the world who can perform a proper Myronese knot. Now, that was a funny little joke, of course, but the whole thing is really quite juvenile, and it's just an excuse to get some more tits and other parts onto the screen, and we really don't need it. It's a little too fantastical even for fantasy, as one critic put it. It's more fantastical than anything George comes up with, so unnecessary, I think. The high, on the other hand, was totally necessary and really quite awesome. I think that the acting in the final scene between obviously where Locke decides to shorten one of Jaime's arms a little bit, and he misplaces his sword hand, basically. The really strong acting there, I mean, Nikolai Coster-Waldau is fantastic, and I think he does a fabulous job, but watching Gwendoline Christie through that scene, when she starts to realize that something is wrong, that Jaime isn't twigging to what Locke is up to, the fear and the sort of the horror that's starting to grow on her face, I thought it's just really well done. It was well shot, well acted, and it's a really worthy moment to end the episode on, and we're quite sure that there were a lot of shocked viewers out there who hadn't read the books and did not see that one coming, so that was a great high for this episode. And that's it for our bonus material for this week's episode of Game of Thrones. You can join us again next week as we discuss the 4th episode, and now his watch has ended. Those words are the sort of burial words, the words you say over a River of Night's watch when he's buried. So you can guess that the Night's Watch is going to be meeting some problems, and I can promise that this next episode is going to be fully as
exciting and interesting and amazing, especially the finale, which may be one of the strongest final moments in the series to date. So a lot to look forward to. So see you next week.